Week 13, it's officially a wrap. Welcome to NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer, along with Eric Edholm. Mike Yam with you. Look, we're going to go through a bunch of these teams here, but I got to tell you, Eric, sometimes our perception of teams before the season is a little off. I don't know if we're necessarily going to sink a few squads, but the real estate in terms of the length of the season has shortened up. Injuries happen. It's kind of wild to think about really notable squads that are going to be on the back half of your rankings.
Absolutely, right? I had the 49ers near the very top at the start of the season. I was a big Bengals believer. Believe I had them in the top 10. You know, we can go down the list. Cowboys, there are other teams that certainly fit that bill. And we've kind of pushed them to the side, Mike. I'm sorry. They're not in that upper half. Right now, they're kind of out of the picture and looking in.
Yeah, they are. But we still have some premier teams that have absolutely balled this season, and not necessarily a ton of change at the top of the rankings as we go through some of your squads here. In fact, with the top four teams, with the Lions, the Bills, the Eagles, and the Kansas City Chiefs, in that order, sit 1 through 4. By the way, from a Lions perspective, 11-1, that is the best start in franchise history. The Vikings, maybe not getting nearly enough love. I'm going to make sure we talk about them. The Packers sit at number 6. Cannot wait to see them on Thursday Night Football against the Lions squad. At 7, it's the Steelers. Russ with over 400 passing yards. He was cooking in week number 13. And the Ravens at 8. Yeah, we have a real kicking problem. Time for the Team of the Week, presented by Truist. Instead of one singular team, I'm going to ask you about the group of the top 4, Eric. These are really talented teams, and yet as I was watching some of these games unfold, I started to hedge over the weekend and say, is this the right order? So I'm going to frame it this way to you. Of the top 4 teams, who do you think is best situated to make a deep run and, more importantly, win a Super Bowl?
Yeah, it may not reflect how I have them right now. I mean, I always say it's what the team is at this very moment, right? And a week can obviously have a big effect on the rankings. Didn't this week, but yeah, if you just take those top 4, I can obviously make a case for the Kansas City Chiefs. We know their recent track record. They're going for their 3rd straight Super Bowl. I can clearly make a case for the Lions. They've been the best team, arguably, weeks 1 through now in the NFL this season. Certainly could make a case for the Bills, the way they're playing, killing the Niners. But I'm going to go with the Eagles just because I think that win over the Ravens did kind of tell us a lot about them as a team. They played phenomenal ball since the bye. You know, they march into Baltimore, come out with a win after falling behind by 2 scores. It really was a statement victory in a lot of ways, up by 2 scores late before the cosmetic touchdown. But they can beat you in so many ways. The long ball, the power run game, the finesse run game, the screen game. Defensively, they've gotten so good. The secondary, Zach Bond at linebacker, Jalen Carter wrecking people on defense. It's really a full team effort right now, and it's been impressive to watch after, frankly, a disappointing season, even one that started 10-1 a year ago. So I'm buying on the Eagles, even if they are number 3 in my power rankings right now.
I also think you made a really good point in your article about all of these teams on NFL.com. The Eagles an easier schedule than the Lions the rest of the way. So I think there's a reasonable conversation about home field advantage, what's going to end up being more important. I'm glad I'm not alone here because I've been loving up this Lions team all season long. But after the win that the Eagles had against the Ravens, game is done. And I sort of leaned back on the couch for a second. I was like, are they better than Detroit? Because that was a really impressive win. Although, once again, I can story every single one of these losses for the Ravens. It's still a little bit of a head scratcher. We'll talk about Baltimore in just a second. But I want to move on to number 5, the Minnesota Vikings. In any other year, we're talking about them as one of the premier teams. Got double-digit wins already. I started the show asking you about perception. Is our perception of Sam Darnold the reason why this team does not get more love nationally?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely something to that, the Darnold factor, right? You look at the teams above them on the list, they have more established quarterbacks or more established systems, perhaps. And, there has been a little bit of volatility for a 10-2 team. They've had some ups and downs. They've blown some big leads. They've had to fight off some lesser teams. But you're right. I mean, a couple years ago, they won a lot of football games, and I think everything was undone because they lost that wild card game to the Giants. But, we shouldn't forget the fact that they were a competitive team with all the quarterback injuries last year. And Darnold has been pretty darn steady, all things considered. Has he been amazing? I don't know. But really from overtime against Chicago, I think until now, he's played some pretty good ball and has the Lions in a great spot the Vikings in a great spot heading into that big game against the Lions on Thursday.
I think everyone makes a big deal about the quarterback, and rightfully so. You'd want one of the more talented guys than not have one of the most talented guys. Say what you want about Sam Darnold, who once again is just delivering this season. Joe Burrow is top 5 quarterback in the NFL, and he's having, at least numbers-wise, an MVP-type season. Doesn't matter. They can't win some football games. This is a really good football team. Emphasis on the team part from a Vikings perspective. The Steelers checking in at number 7. I got to tell you, if the offense looks like it did this last time out, they are one of the scariest teams in the AFC. I just don't know how reliable that is, considering some of the hiccups leading into this past game that they had offensively.
Yeah, I think you should start the game tape immediately after the pick 6, which really wasn't Russell Wilson's fault. It may not have been Pickett's fault. There may have been a call there that went uncalled, but absolutely, did Wilson look good on Sunday? I mean, this is the Bengals. They've had a lot of bad defensive performances. You can't overlook that, but the long ball was there. The few opportunities he had, he took them and he hit them. The short and intermediate stuff, he was just carving up those Cincinnati zones all day long. And when it took time to, move around a little bit and find guys like Freiermuth down the middle, he did. I mean, Russell Wilson has taken this job and run with it. I know the play has been a little bit up and down leading into this game, but I don't think there are very many questions about whether Mike Tomlin made the right decision. And they could still bring in Justin Fields for a game-sealing scramble there at the end. And he's got his role. Wilson's got a bigger one right now.
By the way, when Tomlin went to Fields there, what was going through your mind? Because personally, I was like, don't do this. And obviously, I was wrong once again about the quarterback situation. Tomlin knows his guys.
He knows his guys. He knows the situation. He's bypassed some of those opportunities in the past, but he took it late in the game and it paid off with a 7-yard run. And yeah, I mean, this is the kind of Steelers team that can make some noise in the playoffs.
All right, number 8, the team that I think has got the best roster in the NFL, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. There is now officially, if you didn't think there was before, you have to now. There is a kicking problem with arguably the greatest kicker in the history of the game, who's probably, a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. What am I supposed to do if I'm a Ravens fan with the Justin Tucker situation?
Yeah, 8 missed field goals, 2 missed extra points on the season, cost them in the Steelers game, cost them on Sunday as well. And, look, it was a close game. They could have made it a 10-0 score. Misses that one. Missed 2 other kicks throughout the course of the game. Had a chance to take the lead both times. Couldn't do it. It really was frustrating. And look, this is a player who's obviously had, built a reputation as one of the greatest kickers of all time, arguably the GOAT as far as kickers go. But this season has not gone according to plan. Now, most of the misses have been longer ones, right? They've been 50 and above. But we've seen the last 3 games, he's missed some sub 50-yard kicks. And boy, this is a Ravens team that hasn't been as proficient in the red zone every single week. So, this is the kind of opportunities that they have to cash in on if they want to be a serious Super Bowl contender at this point. What do? I mean, they're sticking with them for now, but it's a tough call.
Do you bring someone in to compete?
I think I would at least have somebody at the ready on the practice squad, ready to go, maybe take, some of the kickoff duties away from things like that. But John Harbaugh knows his team, knows his guy. There's also the chance that Tucker could work himself out of this slump. After all, his credentials, if there's a mechanical issue, a health issue, maybe they can figure it out.
Yeah, I just don't know what the next move is, because if it's a confidence thing and then you bring in a kicker to compete, I don't know if that sinks in one way or another, right? I don't know Justin Tucker like that. I mean, Harbaugh knows the strings to pull, but from a play calling perspective, I mean, it's got to change in some of these games. By the way, crazy stat here: 5 losses, obviously, for the Ravens. A combined point total in those games of 22. The missed kicks in those games from Justin Tucker, those were worth 22 points. All right, more to come here on Power Rankings. In fact, we were worried that the season was spiraling out of control for the Houston Texans. What does a win do for the perception of this team? The answer is coming up next. Back here on Power Rankings, squads 9 through 16. The Chargers still a top 10 team, 187 total yards in a win against the Falcons, who we will talk about in just a moment. The Broncos victorious on Monday Night Football. At 11, it's the Commanders. Nice to see Jaden Daniels get back into the win column. Same for the Texans, who are at 12. At 13, a crazy overtime win for the Bucs against Carolina, who deserve some flowers. I know there's some losses for this Panther squad, but they're playing well. At 14, the Seahawks. Leonard Williams, the big man touchdown that was the difference in the game against his former squad, the Jets. At 15, it's the Cardinals. 2 straight losses after a 4-game winning streak. That NFC West, a little dicey right now because the Rams sit at number 16. Their offense came alive against the Saints in the second half. All right, number 10, I want to focus and get your take on the Broncos. Bo Nix hadn't been turning the ball over. 2 picks in this game. I don't know if they were necessarily his fault. There were some explosives in this game. But are you concerned about the defense that had been balling out and all of a sudden had some issues against famous Jameis?
Yeah, they came up with the big plays, right? Obviously, the 2 pick sixes and the game sort of sealing interception. Nick Bonito was great. He had a sack, a lot of pressures, and one of those pick sixes. But yeah, the coverage. I mean, the secondary busts were at times glaring. I will say that Jameis did make some great throws. This was not one of them, obviously. He got baited into both interceptions, maybe. But yeah, I mean, look, that's something you got to look for. And Jerry Jeudy going into his old house and tearing him up the way he did concern me. But, you know, I will say, too, I mean, Bo Nix made some poor decisions in this game. I liked when he was playing within the confines of Sean Payton's offense a little bit more and, you know, taking those opportunities when they come, like this pass right here. But there was some risk involved, too. So Bo Nix got a little greedy at times, I thought, on Monday night.
Yeah, by the way, Jerry Jeudy, who you named, dropped 235 receiving yards, the most ever in a revenge game by a wide receiver. Beat T.O. when he matched up against the Niners. I think it was 213 receiving yards. Point is, Jeudy put on an absolute show. At 11, it is the Commanders. Get back in the win column here. Are they a dangerous team in the NFC?
Yeah, you've been waiting for this kind of offensive breakout, really, you know, since before the Hail Mary game. But it was great to see their run game start. I mean, Brian Robinson, I think, is such an important part of what they do. You know, he was streaking into the open several times. That helped out Daniels quite a bit. It helped out Terry McLaurin. I mean, getting the ball to Robinson and Terry McLaurin early in games is never a bad thing, in my opinion. The Commanders finally did that. And look, you can say, okay, it's just the Titans, but Titans have been playing fairly competitive lately, and this is a good defense. Statistically, they still remain in the top 10, even after giving up 200 whatever yards on the ground. So this was a good defense that the Commanders had really a bounce-back game against, and that's always good to see, even if the wins haven't been there for Tennessee. So I think they're dangerous. They're back, but, you know, they still have some questions to answer.
23 rushing touchdowns for the Commanders this season, second in the NFL, only behind Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and the Philadelphia Eagles. At 13, it's the Buccaneers. What an exciting game down the stretch against Carolina. But I want to take this thing big picture here because they pull even with the Falcons inside that division. Atlanta's still in head because of the head-to-head that they have with that squad. But because of some of the disarray that we've seen, and I know the Bucs haven't been playing great, but they battled some injuries, generally speaking. Is the arrow trending up for them to win the division?
Yeah, I mean, they've obviously been so competitive in a lot of these games. The 2 head-to-head losses against Atlanta really, really sting right now because that momentum would be even stronger. But getting Mike Evans back into the offense was a huge development. You know, even if Baker wasn't great on Sunday, he had somebody he could rely on. And they may have a breakout star here in Bucky Irving, who took, I want to say, had 13 touches in fourth quarter and overtime. You know, this is a guy who was averaging maybe 13 a game for a big stretch of the season. Kind of took over that lead role for Rachaad White. And give Mayfield credit, even on a night when he didn't have his best stuff, he's still making things happen, limping around, scrambling for first downs. Enough plays from the defense, just enough. And then Baker doing his thing along with the run game. It's a close win, but a much-needed win for Tampa.
Not for nothing, man. You know, Baker Mayfield, he's slowly become one of my favorite guys in the league to go and watch. There's this moxie, this intensity, confidence. You know, they go down late in regulation, and there's like 30 seconds. I think they had at least one timeout in hand. I'm like, they're going to get into field goal territory. Baker's going to will it to happen, and he did, and they go on to win in overtime. Time for Future Champions. It's presented by FanDuel. taking a look at the odds in the NFC West. This thing, not exactly how we drew it up before the season. The Seahawks still the leaders of the pack. Arizona following them. Then it's the Rams in that third position and the San Francisco 49ers, who you will discuss a little bit later. The worst odds right now to go and win this division. Let's look at team number 14. It is the Seahawks. What do I make of this team? I week to week here, I'm always a little confused about the squad.
Yeah, and let's hope they don't have as adventurous a special teams day next week as they did Sunday against the Jets. Against a better team, maybe they can't come back from their self-inflicted mistakes. The fumbles, the muffs, allowing a 99-yard touchdown, having an extra point blocked. Yes, they made a couple field goals too and made life tough for Aaron Rodgers there, put some pressure on him a little bit. But you know, I do give him credit for crawling back from a deficit like that, but yeah. I just don't know, man. There's something about this team that's kind of holding me back just a little bit, even with that golden opportunity in the NFC West.
You know what it is? In first place, but we've seen some losses from them and some inconsistency from Geno Smith with some big turnovers, so it scares you a little bit. Charbonnet, though, if he runs like he did against the Jets, and by the way, even being down against Gangrene early in that game had me a little bit worried about what this team really could be, but if Charbonnet continues to run like this, he's an absolute force. Meanwhile, some big-name teams before the year that had Super Bowl aspirations might be long gone. Is Eric willing to end their postseason dreams today? Find out next. Mike Hammond, Eric Edholm with you back here on NFL Power Rankings. Eric's team 17 through 24. The Colts, a big drive to get a win, sitting in the 17th position at 18. Thanksgiving not kind to the Miami Dolphins at 19. 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in the last 3 games for Kirk Cousins. That team is reeling. So are the San Francisco 49ers at 20. At 21, it's the Cowboys' first home win of the season. Get it done against a divisional opponent in the Giants on Thanksgiving. At 22, the Bengals, tough loss to Pittsburgh. 23, who is the Bears' next football coach? That might be the biggest question right now. And at 24, Saints couldn't close the Los Angeles Rams. Time for Power Moves, presented by Energizer. Up 3 spots. It is the Indianapolis Colts. I want to get your thoughts on this team, Eric. Should I don't know, give them some love right now? Like a team that's playing with a little bit of confidence. Anthony Richardson. It feels like there's some swag late in these games.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say, did they get a little bit of a bump from the teams ahead of them last week all losing? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's one way to power up. But when you've seen Anthony Richardson kind of take a step forward and play the way he has, especially late in games, you know, with the game on the line, you know, when he threw that interception with about 5 minutes to go, down a touchdown, I thought, boy, this isn't looking good. They're going to lose at Foxborough. He willed them back. They stopped him on defense a couple times. That was impressive. But really, it was Richardson. His legs were a big part of the story on Sunday. Look, he's flawed. He's still a 50% passer, but this is a tough guy to defend. You know, when he makes the throws, he's a tough guy to tackle, tough guy to bring down in the backfield. And, you know, he can power through some of those attempts, too, and get off unusual-looking passes like that little lob to Taylor for the touchdown and back of the end zone there to Alec Pierce. He's done a lot of interesting things this year, even if the development is still needed. I'm taking my chances on him. I think he's got an opportunity to kind of will the Colts into the back end of the playoffs.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the Week 15 matchup against Denver all of a sudden has got my attention because of the play of the Colts, who once again move up 3 spots in your power rankings. At 19, it's the Falcons. Should we be talking about Michael Penix?
I think you almost have to at this point. It would have been, you know, crazy. Obviously, think back to the draft, and we said, what are they doing drafting Penix? He's not going to play this year. Well, hold that thought just a minute. Obviously, we haven't seen a whole lot of Penix. Came in late against Denver, had some throws. We saw a ton of them in the preseason. There's obviously hype about him. His former OC is in the NFL, so you could see how this would translate. He's got the skills, the arm talent, everything there is. And the way Cousins is playing, obviously Sunday wasn't just the first bad game, 4 interceptions, but he hasn't thrown a touchdown in 4 games now. The turnovers are piling up. Some of those passes are looking like Frisbees out there, and that's how you give up the game on Sunday, essentially. That one right there was the one that kind of caught my eye. A little bit too much of a floater out there, and teams are just saying, we're going to jump those routes. I would rather have the chance of getting beat deep because I know I can make a play on those balls. So, yeah, this is really a problem for Atlanta. They were 6-3. They were loaded with this division. They were all set and ready to go, coast down the stretch to a playoff spot. Not like that anymore, man. Tampa is breathing down their necks, and they've got to figure out what to do with the quarterback position.
Yeah, it's funny because if you're watching this show right now as opposed to listening to it, I guess the point still remains. Some of these throws, I mean, they're like just wobbling. It makes me think almost something's wrong with Kirk in terms of a health situation. Meanwhile, two teams that I think were on the short list to win a Super Bowl this year. I want to know if you're going to sync both of them. I'm going to start at number 20 here with the San Francisco 49ers. No Christian McCaffrey, no Jordan Mason, both those guys. Well, McCaffrey, obviously the PCL injury, and Jordan Mason just got put on IR. The season continues to tailspin in the wrong direction. Are they out of the postseason in your mind?
They're nominally in it, right? I think they have something like a 3 to 4% chance it would take an inside straight. They're in the one division that's kind of forgiving, if you will. The NFC West is so tight right now. Everybody's kind of logged together, but Purdy's hurt. Obviously, Ayuk's out for the season. Kittle's been playing banged up. You mentioned the running back injuries. It extends throughout the roster. It's feeling more and more in my mind like the 2020 season, which has been the one outlier year under Kyle Shanahan. Normally so good in November and December, able to go in and battle teams like the Bills head-to-head and even win occasionally. That's not the case for this team. You can see McCaffrey wasn't right. He left the game. He's probably done for the year. And with it go the hopes of the 49ers, who I think will be a title contender next year, depending on what happens with the roster. But this was a missed opportunity, I believe, this season because of all the bad luck that piled up.
Yeah, it really has. Bad luck is probably the best way to describe it with all of these injuries around this squad. It's funny, a couple weeks ago on this show, I said to Eric, I'm done loving up Cincinnati. They're done. And then we did game day preview on Sunday mornings on the NFL channel, and I thought they were going to win. And I thought they're going to win convincingly against the Steelers. That did not happen. But there's not a lot of games left here. Bengals, are they done in your mind?
I think they're done. Joe Burrow, they asked him, he gave kind of a Jim Mora-like playoffs. Are you kidding me? That's the last thing on my mind right now. Burrow's been okay. I would say his play is leveled off, but I feel like he's got this burden on him to play as spectacularly as he possibly can every single week. He even kind of talked about it after the game because of what the defense is allowing. Now, there are issues offensively they have to figure out, but they're far less concerning about what's happened to Lou Anarumo's unit. We saw this trend in the wrong direction last season. It is most certainly there now. They've had a handful of decent performances on defense, but the vast majority have been bad, regrettable, and it questions whether this team can make a Super Bowl in Burrow's time in Cincinnati.
Which is just wild to think, because we always talk about needing the quarterback to get it done. They have the quarterback. They got this offensive firepower.
Yeah.
There's got to be such a concerted effort to get better defensively in this year's draft and over the next couple of years, even in free agency, just to try to make this thing competitive. Just a couple of years removed from the Super Bowl. It is just wild to think. Meanwhile, teams 25 through 32 here. The Browns. Jameis is fun, but not able to get it done. They sit at number 25. Bryce Young, the guy the rest of the season, he's at 26 in this Panthers squad. The Jets at 27, the Titans 28, the Patriots are 29, the Raiders checking in at 30. At 31, it is the New York Giants. And good news from a Jaguars perspective. Trevor Lawrence saying that he's home after that vicious hit that he suffered, that he's home and he is feeling better. Eric, before we wrap up here, I got to tell you, there's something that's been bothering me for basically the 30 minutes that we've been doing the show. Started off the program talking about perception. I just want to get your take on this. Yep. I mentioned Minnesota. Sam Darnold. Are we not giving them enough love because of the Sam Darnold factor? People just don't believe it. Doesn't this remind you, though, of a couple of years ago when the Detroit Lions, they had Jared Goff. People were like, oh, can he really get it done? Doesn't it have, we don't question if the Lions can go and win a Super Bowl. Should we be having the same conversation about Minnesota?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a fair question, right? I think even Brock Purdy faced this at one point. Certainly other guys have. But once you kind of graduate to that, most of the times, unless you get to that latter stage of your career like Aaron Rodgers and start failing. But yeah, there is a negative perception against him that I think we have to sort of wean off of. And, it applies to multiple quarterbacks around this league.
Eric, you're the best, man. Love working with you.
You're the second best.
I'll take that in most people's eyes as well. Appreciate everyone watching.